Hundreds of thousands of Americans lost their jobs in 2023, and millions more are expected to in 2024. But at the same time, you're reading endless articles about how the economy is doing great. So if the economy is booming, then why does everyone feel broke? According to the US Department of Commerce, the economy is growing much faster than expected, yet 96% of Americans are worried about the economy. So what's going on? First, and I never thought I would say this, but Americans save too much money. In 2020, Americans saved at a rate never before seen in history. But it wasn't because we suddenly became more financially literate. It was because people stayed at home, businesses shut down, and we had nothing to buy except toilet paper thanks to the pandemic. But at the same time, our incomes increased because of stimulus checks and higher unemployment payments. As a result, Americans saved in excess of $2.6 trillion in their piggy banks. But this wasn't exactly good news. When the economy reopened, people did something strange that led to the consequences we're still facing today. In behavioral finance, they call this revenge spending. Basically, after being stuck at home for months, people had the urge to spend a lot of money to make up for lost time. New outfits from Abercrombie, a second house, and a bunch of Mr. Magic lamps. But this became a never-ending pricing cycle. Thanks to supply chain issues and corporate greed, the price of everything went up. But people still continued to buy things, resulting in more demand and even higher prices. Lemon pepper wings from Wingstop now cost $3,000 for 5 pieces, a cup of coffee $8, and smoothies are $20. But this was unsustainable. The Fed raised interest rates to discourage people from spending. Credit cards, home loans, car loans, and student loans became way more expensive. The problem is, this didn't really work because Americans started using their $2.6 trillion in excess savings to continue buying and buying until today. The Fed projected these excess savings would be nearly depleted by the end of 2023, and it happened. But now, something much worse has taken its place. But first, if you want to save more money, using my ultimate savings goal tracker and checklist is the best way to do that. Get it for free, link down below. Studies show 96% of Americans are worried about the economy, yet people are still spending. But this time, it's a bit different. Instead of spending their excess savings, Americans are now spending money they don't have with credit cards, resulting in the average credit card balance to reach a 10-year high of $6,000. And the problem is, there's no sign of slowing down. Next, when it comes to who's at fault, you might blame the average person for irresponsibly spending money and buying frivolous things, but that might not be the case. Although research shows people are still spending a lot of money, they might be missing one important point. Americans are spending more money to buy fewer things. One thing I really look forward to every single weekend is taking my mom out to lunch and catching up. We don't go anywhere lavish. Usually it's just a super casual hole-in-the-wall cash-only restaurant because you know that's where the really good food is. For as long as I can remember, we could get a nice meal, Malaysian, Thai, Hong Kong food for like $30. But nowadays, it's looking more like $60, and the portions are getting smaller. These lunch dates with my mom are super important to me, so it's not like I'm gonna stop going to them, but nowadays, it does feel like highway robbery whenever I get the check. Headlines say the economy looks pretty good right now. It's recovering, jobs numbers look great, and inflation fell from 9% to 3%. So why is everything still so expensive? The problem is, we're all misunderstanding the data. While economists in the Federal Reserve focus on alphabet soup like CPI, PCE, ABC, and all the metrics to measure the economy, the average American focuses on the absolute price of the things they need and want. How much is a gallon of gasoline? A burger cost how much? No way I'm paying $50 for pineapple pizza. Inflation falling from 9% to 3%, it still means things are still getting more expensive, just at a slower rate. Instead of pineapple pizza increasing from $10 to $10.90, it would increase to $10.30. But what if I told you that there's actually an even bigger problem than inflation? But first, like many of you, I didn't grow up with money. My parents did everything they could to save. They bought my clothes in a bigger size so I can still wear them years later, and I realized that growing up without money, you kind of build a lot of financial baggage and trauma that negatively impacts you later in life. What I think is really helpful is therapy, which can give you the strategies to work through this. That's why I'm excited to talk about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp's mission is to make therapy more affordable and accessible. Finding a therapist can be tough, especially when you're limited to the options in your area. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online, it's remote. And by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. It's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. Check out the link below. It's betterhelp.com/VincentChan. Clicking that link supports the channel, but more importantly, gets you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp. And because finding a therapist is a little like dating, if you don't really fit with that therapist, you can easily switch to a new one at no additional cost, without stressing about insurance or who's in your network. If you ever went through or are currently going through a hard time, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in the description or visit betterhelp.com/VincentChan. Thanks again to BetterHelp for supporting this video. When it comes to inflation, there's an even bigger problem. In economics, inflation is measured with this thing called the Consumer Price Index, or CPI. Basically, they pick a basket of things like housing, food, and groceries, and compare the cost for all these things to what it cost in the past. The problem is, what proportion of each good and expense do you count in CPI? One household might always be going on cruises and eating caviar, while another is busy paying rent and groceries. Naturally, inflation will mean different things to different people. Policy advisor Eugene Ludwig might know a thing or two about this issue. Ludwig says the CPI distorts the real economic picture for lower and middle income Americans because the CPI's basket of goods also includes things like yachts, second homes, and hotels, which is kind of ridiculous because how many people are buying yachts? Ludwig determined the cost of household minimum needs rose 64% from 2001 to 2020, which is 1.4 times higher than the official rate of inflation over the same period. Ludwig also found that housing prices went up 149% and medical costs 157%, but the CPI only said they went up 54% and 90% respectively. The problem is, the inflation numbers that we see might be severely underestimating the price changes that actually matter. Next, there's the fake good stuff to think about, specifically in two areas. Firstly, there's housing. When it comes to buying a house, there's two groups of people. Group A, who bought a house a few years ago or refinanced, they're feeling pretty lucky. Then there's Group B, everyone else, including me, who's either renting or looking to buy a house. These two groups are experiencing a completely different reality. Mortgage rates are still at a record high, and the price difference is staggering. If you bought a $400,000 house with a 3.22% 30-year fixed-rate mortgage with 20% down, you pay $1,716 per month. But if you bought a house nowadays with a 7.09 mortgage rate, the monthly mortgage payment on the same exact house is going to be $2,477. These higher costs are preventing people from buying a house while existing homeowners are sitting on their lovely couch with record low interest rates. Next, there's jobs to think about. In the past 2 years, tech companies laid off close to 500,000 workers, including tech giants once thought to be impenetrable, Google, Meta, and Amazon. Then there's Wall Street with major financial institutions, Goldman Sachs, Wells Fargo, and Morgan Stanley, who cut about 20,000 positions in just 2023 alone. Even for people who held on to their jobs, things aren't looking too great. Many companies like X, Hulu, and more are cutting employee benefits like parental leave and childcare to reduce cost. Salaries are taking a hit, bonuses are shrinking, and things are only going to get worse. According to Indeed, job listings for tech roles are now down by 55%, and the banking industry down 40%. But despite how bad things get, you might not actually want the prices of things to get cheaper. Which sounds absolutely crazy, especially when credit card debt is climbing, people are defaulting on their loans, and Americans are running out of savings. And if you want to quickly save more money, get my ultimate savings goal tracker and checklist for free. Link down below. In economics, they call this deflation. Basically, it's when the average price of all things people buy comes down. In the beginning of the month, you might be able to buy Mr. Magic Lamp for $50, but later that same month, you'll know it will cost $20. Naturally, you'll hold off on buying it because you expect the price to drop even further. No one wants to be the chump who bought a new computer or AirPods today, only to see its price slashed tomorrow. Delaying purchases when prices fall is a rational calculation for an individual. The problem is, if everyone stops buying things simultaneously, expecting prices to fall, the economy will tank. Businesses can't sell their products, they lay off workers who in turn buy even fewer things, resulting in fewer sales and so on. The last time we had a prolonged period of prices falling was the Great Depression. But there's an even more obvious reason why no one, including you, actually wants the prices of all things to fall, because that would mean everyone's income will also decline. But what if I told you us feeling broke and terrible should be the least of your worries? What most people don't realize is that nowadays, Americans need $233,000 a year to feel financially secure. But in 2022, the real median household income was just a third of that. Click here to find out where our money is going and why it's not looking so good.